Bill Cosby had a rare good day. Today, the LA County District Attorney's Office announced they're not filing criminal charges in two cases. One in which a woman claimed Cosby raped her in '65 when she was 17 years old, and another in which a woman said Cosby sexually assaulted her at a party in 2008. Of course, the Cosby saga stretches well beyond those two incidents. A recent New York Daily News cover described it best as a case of he said, she said, she said, she said, on and on. Cosby's wife, Camille, was to be deposed today after a judge refused to throw out a subpoena, but last night she was granted a stay so she can appeal. If she loses, she may have to answer questions under oath from a lawyer representing 7 women who've accused Cosby of sexual misconduct and who filed a defamation suit against him. Cosby had never been criminally charged, as you know, until 2 weeks ago. He was arraigned December 30th for aggravated indecent assault in Pennsylvania, where a woman said Cosby drugged and sexually assaulted her at his home in 2004. It's one of more than 50 accusations in all by women who said Cosby drugged, sexually assaulted, and or raped them over the past 5 decades. One of those women joins me now. Helen Gumpel's a former fashion model and actress, now victims advocate. Good to see you again, Helen.
Thank you very much.
We're also joined by her lawyer, Mitchell Garabedian, who, as you know, has represented victims and survivors of sex abuse around the world, including many victims of Catholic priests. And of course, he's a central figure in the film Spotlight. Good to see you, too.
Thank you for having me.
Mitchell, I hate to go over this again, and I'm sorry for people who didn't see it. You appeared on Cosby's show. He calls you into his dressing room afterwards. His robe is loosened, puts his crotch in your face, offers you a drink. You refuse it. Is that the picture,
Yes,
pretty much?
I had a co-starring role on the show. And soon after that, I did a very good job. Soon after that, he called me in. And I was in the studios. And I believe it was Frank Scotti, the ex-NBC employee, who came out at the Daily News saying that, Cosby used to use him to escort women into his dressing room. And that's when this incident happened.
How did he react when you refused, Helen, the drink?
He became very angry. He tried to force the drink on me, and he forced it, and his face clouded over, and he got angry. So in the end, he threw me out, and of course Scotty was standing outside the door and escorted me out. And he attempted to sexually assault me in the dressing room.
How old were you at the time?
I was 32.
And he's this huge international megastar.
Yes, he is a huge international megastar, and you would think that he would not use the NBC Carsey Warner Studios to do this. And because he's a huge megastar, he wouldn't need to use this ruse on women, if he wanted a date.
Last time you and Mitchell were here, you both I looked at the tape today, used the word accountability. You had been here right after that deposition was released. Obviously, since then, as I mentioned, he's been charged in one case in Pennsylvania. Is that the kind of accountability that you were looking for?
Yes, I think it's fantastic, because what happens now is that it evens the playing field. It can't be he said, she said, and it can't be argued in the press anymore. It's going to be depositions in a legal setting.
Do you feel the same way?
Yes, I think the evidence will come forward now that the legal process is underway. On the civil side, you're going to have depositions taking place. His wife is going to have to testify at a deposition.
Isn't that spousal privilege? Isn't she going to be able to say, these are confidential conversations between me and my husband? I cannot be required to disclose them.
In that very narrow sense, but a lawyer can sit there across the table from her and ask her, when you spoke to your husband, was he on the phone with someone? Did you hear him speaking to anyone else? Was anybody else in the room? That's not protected information.
I'm sort of surprised to hear you both say unequivocally that this is a major step in accountability. What happens after this trial? This is not a slam dunk from what I read. What happens? He goes to trial, he gives depositions, he has to sit through testimony. What happens when he's acquitted? And the world hears Bill Cosby acquitted of sexual assault. Maybe others of those 50 women are saying things that just simply aren't true, Ellen.
Well, I can't account for everyone. Of the women I've met in New York, when I look into their eyes and I hear their stories, I believe them.
Oh, I'm not questioning it.
Yeah.
I'm saying the message to the public is, well, there's been one jury that got to hear all the facts, not reporters, but juries, and a jury decided he was not guilty as charged.
These cases are all about resiliency. I've been handling sex abuse cases for about 20 years now, okay? If he's acquitted, we'll go on to the next case, and we'll have evidence produced, and we'll have a guilty verdict.
Will there be other criminal charges? I mean, L.A. decided not to go ahead. There's statute of limitations questions, adequacy of evidence, which I think was the issue in Los Angeles. Are you convinced there'll be other criminal charges?
Oh, this is just the beginning of a long process for him. The district attorneys around the country are going to look into these matters individually, and this is just the beginning of a long process.
Is Pennsylvania, my hope was, as a former practicing attorney, that what happened in Pennsylvania, and this guy was just elected, reversed the decision of his predecessor.
Yeah.
Is this going to put pressure on other DAs to follow his lead and do what he did, despite what we saw in LA?
It's such a political move. You're going to have to look at each state individually. I mean, why wasn't Bernard Cardinal Law indicted in Massachusetts back in 2000? Such a political move. You have to look at each state individually.
You know, I want to play something you said about when you were here last time in July about accountability as well, and I want you to address this if you can too, Helen. Again, this is July 7th.
Okay. I believe that as a woman, his wife should come out and make some kind of restitution to these other women.
What does restitution mean?
I think it's apology, and I think it's economic restitution. People have called us liars. People have said, oh, it's just sour grapes. We don't believe you. No. Make their lives nicer now. You know, that as a woman, be responsible, be the better person in that marriage. And he's a billionaire.
Is that the end game, that words have to cross the lips of either Camille or Bill Cosby in which they acknowledge? Is that not the end game here for people in your position?
Yeah,
Helen?
it is the end game. It's knowing that the truth is going to come out. And whether, you know, in whatever way, which I think Pennsylvania shows that, you know, he has been indicted in a criminal charge, that is one way that it might come out.
And do people ever in these circumstances, we know what happened in the Catholic Church, do people ever face the music and honestly look into a camera, look in the eyes of a Helen and say, I know I did it, I know my husband did it? Is that fantasy or real?
It's rare. It's extremely rare. But what you do have is you have the ability through the court system to obtain evidence that indicates that maybe the perpetrator has admitted it, for instance, to the psychotherapist. And you can gain validation for the victim in that way.
You know, one of the most, I don't know if you agree, when New York Magazine did the piece, which was after you were here, with the faces and stories of 35 women, I think, including you, what impact did that have on you?
I think it was fantastic because I got to meet these women, these victims, face to face, and I saw the damage that this man had done. And it's not only their word. There's things like Mark Whitaker in his authorized biography, which said that they had to move Cosby out of Los Angeles because there was so-called trouble at the Playboy Mansion, move him to New York, where he started this drugging and raping again. So it's, you know, in some, they don't actually admit the drugging or the raping, but why did they have to move him out of Hollywood into New York? So there's a set of women in Los Angeles, there's a set of women in New York, and they knew it. Mrs. Cosby knew it, and the more I get into the case, because I'm involved in it, she was his business manager. So it looks like a big conspiracy to protect this man because he was he's the big breadwinner.
We should say now you're a victim's advocate, which may come clear through those comments, but that's part of what you do.
Yeah, the advocacy is because my husband, as a teenager, was violently sexually molested by a Jesuit priest. And when I look into these cases, it's so similar. The New York Jesuits moved their priests all across America, and this priest that did this to my husband when he was a teenager, did it to a 13-year-old in New York, and they moved him to Maine. And that's where my husband was assaulted, trying to protect a friend that had passed out because of this guy.
You know, the stories sound so similar through the ages. Helen, it's really good to see you again. Thank you so much for your time.
Much.
Mitchell,
Thank
you
you
as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.